pretty important spot. It's you could compare it probably to Bulgaria, who everybody knows Bulgaria, which is also at the coast, but a bit more in the north. But in Bulgaria, the soil is much richer. It's a little bit cooler. It does a bit more rain. So in the Maremma, the wines do have to suffer more. But as everybody knows in the wine industry, when things do have to suffer a bit more, very often also the fruit gets more interesting. So Maremma is definitely something where we believe a lot and where we invested a lot of time and energy. We will taste actually today 2 wines of our estate, the Maremma estate, and 2 wines from the Chianti Classico estate.
Okay.
To Robert, yeah? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, we can hear you. I'll as long as you're yelling into the microphone, we're going to be okay. I can hear you fine. Maybe what we should do is move to the Chianti Classico Riserva at this point. It might be better.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
So at least the wine will speak by itself.
Yeah, absolutely. What I was interested, Wine Advocate made mention of the fact that 20% of the Chianti Classico is Merlot, and I didn't realize that you were allowed to blend that much Merlot into Sangio and still retain the designation. Is that a usual practice, or is that something that you guys only specifically do?
Well, the Chianti Classico relation has changed a lot in the last years. It used to be always a blend of red and white grapes, and it was for many years at least 85% Sangiovese.
Oh, okay.
Since a bit more than 25 years, the white grapes are forbidden. And since, I would say, 15 years, you are allowed to have a Chianti Classico with at least 80% Sangiovese, but it can also be 100% Sangiovese.
Oh, that's super interesting, because in Australia, a similar rule applies, but it's 15%. So you can put absolutely anything you like up to 15% without changing the designation or the labeling of it. I think that the thing that I noticed on opening these wines earlier today was a certain, there was a tight layering of fruit, and that has retained even after opening now for a while. Hopefully in the glass now it's going to lift a little bit more, but certainly that driver of dark cherry is a big thing for me that I'm seeing again now. And a person who taught me a lot about wine tasting years ago would always talk about writhing around on a damp forest floor and getting inspiration. I never quite understood what he meant, but there is this notion of damp organic, there is that kind of phenolic component to the wine, which is really cool and adds great layer and depth to it.
Our Riserva is, as we just mentioned, a blend of 8% Sangiovese and 20 Merlot. Yeah. And grapes are coming from both spots we do have in the Chianti Classico region, so from Radda in Chianti and from Castellina in Chianti. And the wine matures 16 months in barrels, the Sangiovese in tonneaux, so 500-liter barrels, and the Merlot in barrique. And it's more or less half of them new and half of them used. We're always looking for elegant and well-balanced wine, so we love the barrels, but they should be perfectly well integrated.
There's something amazing about the softness of the wine, and I guess that's the Merlot speaking through, right? There's maybe a salty plum in this part of the world, maybe we'd call it hoisin kind of component to the flavor profile, which is really approachable. I mean, generally when we talk about eating duck in this part of the world, we're looking for things like chasseur, which is a marinated grilled, chasseur pork, which is marinated and grilled, or of course the traditional roasted duck. And I can't think of anything better than that kind of food with this kind of wine as it exists now. I guess over time it's going to evolve and become something slightly different, but certainly that ripeness of fruit, the tobacco leaf kind of component to the wine now, and the steep layering is really very, very intriguing. I wanted to ask you about James Suckling's comment about this wine, where he said it's almost a baby Brunello. and I got a little annoyed on your behalf because it's Chianti Classico. Why is he making this analogy to Brunello? What's that all about?
Well, I guess we can accept that Brunello did a better job in marketing than the Chianti Classico region in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So Brunello as a name gives the idea of more value than the Chianti Classico region, which is actually a shame, because the Chianti Classico region is a beautiful region. It does have a lot of diversity and it does have a lot of quality. But looking at it from this point of view, we should try to take it as a compliment.
Okay, because I rest assured I got annoyed for you when I read that. I thought, no, bugger that. Good Chianti Classico is good Chianti Classico, and you can't try and draw some kind of analogy. Anyway, I'm sure I'll get into trouble for saying that, but
the Chianti Classico region is huge, and there is no doubt that we have any kind of quality with still the same name, Chianti Classico. And Brunello, I have to say, that's just like it is. Brunello is doing a better job in bottling only high quality wine with the name Brunello. So that's easier to understand. It's straightforward as a message, and the message of the Chianti Classico is a bit less straightforward. But there are many wines in our region they don't have to hide, and they are not baby Brunello.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that you're right. Maybe because Brunello has a certain bandwidth of flavor and characteristics, whereas Chianti is so much broader. There's so many different styles and characters. And I know when I first started tasting Italian wine, I found that really hard to get a pin into a classic Chianti because of this variance in style. And then I would say maybe the last 10 years, the way it's matured as well, the way it's made has changed as well from the old days, even 20 years ago. It's a big change, Okay, maybe let's move to the two Ilatraia. Guys, maybe we should try to taste them side by side. So
absolutely.
The 5 and the 15. I'm super excited, and thank you for letting us do this today, Barbara, to see something that's 10 years apart. And interestingly, if you run the numbers on the actual wine ratings, an organization like Wine Spectator, for example, finds the 15 slightly higher rated than the 5, but not significantly. And I think 05, I don't think Wine Advocate saw it. I guess the difference in marketing terms between 2005 and 2015 is a light years difference, and maybe they never reached. But it's going to be super interesting to see the two. Just notice the difference in labels. We've gone from the dotted label in 5 to the standard corporate brand now. So I'll ask you to talk us through these two, if you would.
Well, let's start with the labels, okay? Maremma is a new estate. We started in 1988, and the Ilatraia we started to produce in 2002. 2002, as you may remember, was not considered as a great vintage in Tuscany, but because it was considered as very rainy. But Maremma is very dry, so when Tuscany does have a rainy vintage, we do have some rain in the Maremma, which is not bad at all. So we had a lot of great grapes, and so we decided to produce Ilatraia with the vintage 2002. So 2005 is just the third vintage we produced in total. And as I mentioned before, we really believe a lot in the Maremma region. We think it's an outstanding wine region, and we wanted to give the Maremma its own identity, and that's also why we created a new label. Only in 08, we figured out that it doesn't really make sense. There are two different labels, so we came back to our Brancaia Classico label. But there are also other reasons why we changed the label. So from 02 till to 08, the Ilatraia, so the wine, this wine here, has a blend of 60 Cabernet Sauvignon, 30 Sangiovese, and 5 Petit Verdot. And with the vintage 09, we changed the blend. We changed it into 40% Petit Verdot, 40 Cabernet Sauvignon, and 20 Cabernet Franc. The change of the blend has several reasons. One reason is that when we started in 02, we just didn't have any Cabernet Franc and we didn't have that much Petit Verdot. So the blend we are doing today was just not possible. But the even more important reason is that we had to learn that at our property in the normal vintage, the Sangiovese won't mature without irrigation. Petit Verdot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Cabernet Franc will mature perfectly well each year without irrigation. And we believe very much that the quality of the wine, the quality of the grape change a lot with irrigation. We want to link to the soil. We want that the roots go into the deepness, that they do have to suffer, that they do create flavors which are typical for the spot. And this is, from our point of view, it's just possible with dry farming and not with irrigation. That's why we changed the blend.
So do you, so you have a strict structured blend rather than interpreting the specific demands of vintage? That's quite interesting, because then if you are following that line of thought, you're going to have an incredibly expressive, a wine that's very expressive of that particular year, which is an interesting approach from a winemaking point of view.
We try to keep our blend as similar as possible. It won't be probably 40, 40, 20, could be 42 and 38, but, but as a basic, yes. We really want to have that if you make a lineup from different vintages, that you really can see the difference of the vintage and not so much the different kind of blend.
I think for me,
vintages are great vintages.
Sorry, carry on. Carry on.
No, I just wanted to mention that both vintages are great vintages. 15 was definitely a bit more on the drier and warmer side than 05, but also 05 was a pretty warm vintage. Yeah,
if my reading's right, your vintage in 5 was possibly a little bit more even, more of an even ripening period just towards harvest, whereas 15 could have been challenging because of the heat closer to harvest.
Exactly.
It's quite interesting because I'm trying to, there's pluses and minuses to tasting a wine 10 years apart, and I'm trying to pull that away, because what's really impressive about 5 is that beautiful, soft, sort of gentle flow on the phenolics, whereas 15 is definitely agitated and looking for attention right now. I actually think that if people hang on to that 5 for a little bit longer and maybe revisit at the end of the tasting, it's going to open up more and more and more. There's a beautiful dark talc kind of perfume on the nose. And the thing that I really love on the palate is the caramel at the back. There's this beautiful dulce de leche kind of component just before the finish, which is really beautiful and adds a definite note to the end of it.
I have to say my 05 shows very nice. It's still very alive. Nose is beautiful and everything's concentrated.
It's really gorgeous. There's, but I think the seamlessness of the wine is what's most attractive to me. Like you know it's going to be great on the nose. When you taste it, it just flows all the way through. It really is, at the end of the day, a great expression of a great year. It's really beautiful. What's your thought process in terms of how much longer? Because those acidics are still quite there and ready to go. I mean, there's definite promise for longer term.
Well, I have to say that generally speaking, I would say that our top wines can age easily 20 years. But I have also to admit that Ilatraia 05 was sourced from very young wines. We just started in '98. So
sure.
it's obvious that the wines were very young.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be afraid to say you can easily keep it for at least other 5 years. I'm not really sure if I would go with 05.
Much longer. I think there's a resolution. It's really cool and quite rare for us to find wine direct from the winery. And in this sort of level of condition, it's becoming increasingly difficult for us to source back vintage library, especially from Italy and especially from Tuscany, because the whole world is looking these days to whatever you've got available. And I'd suggest that that's an incredible value buy, whatever little we've got left, to open and drink now. You just need to give it that hour in the decanter first, and then it's just singing now. And the texture is the thing that really grabs me. It's just seamless and ripples. I really love it. It's interesting that the 15 has given definitely higher ratings. And I take your point that 10 years extra vine age makes a massive difference, right?
Well, I think it's a mix of many things, but I truly believe that as older a wine is, as more interesting the fruit is. That's also why we switched some years ago to the muscle selection. So whatever we do replant since 2017 is all from our own wines. Right. So we really believe very much in those things. Also, we are, we got 10 years more experience, and everybody hopes always to improve with more experience. It's not always secure, but that's what we do hope. Yeah. And we have definitely also changed, but not only since 15, already before, our way how we do work with nature. So we stopped any kind of herbicides and pesticides since now 10 years from now. All our fermentation are natural fermentation, so only the natural yeast from the vineyards and from the cellar will ferment our wines, which gives us again the idea of being very authentic and typical for the spot where we are.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the exception to the rule that one improves with age. I'm sure I'm getting more garrulous and more useless as I get older. But certainly when it comes to wines, it's a different point of view. I think that what's interesting, talking to the people at Gaia last week, the point I was talking to them about was there's clearly a house style and a house stamp in what they do. And I guess one seeing this as well here, where the sense of rounded poise and structure is showing in both brilliantly well, despite the fact that 2015 may not be as a successful a vintage as 5 in the books. It's definitely a crowd pleaser. Would you agree that its maturation trajectory is a little bit shorter than 05? That it possibly wouldn't run the distance of the 05?
No, honestly, no. I'm extremely happy with the 2015 Ilatraia. I would say it can easily mature 15 years. Robert, we have to speak very clearly. Unfortunately, it depends always how the wine is stored. Okay, sure. That's very important.
So you've probably come to Singapore where the wine starts sweating the very first second it lands on the tarmac. It's a big problem for us here.
Yeah, then I would give it a little bit less. Okay. A little bit less, yes. But that's also one of the reasons why we try to make our wines in a way that you can enjoy them even when they're very young. And actually, besides, of course, Ilatraia 05, the wines we do taste today, they are somehow babies. Okay, they are really still young. Yeah. But I hope you can agree with me that they do offer already a lot in the nose and also in the mouth.
Yeah, there's a question.
Yeah, Grant, sorry.
Hey, Grant, mate, before we go any further, I just wanted to show you, I'm wearing my drinking shorts. I promise.
See. Warm enough to wear your drinking shorts.
Definitely warm enough.
Yeah, no. And you know what the sad thing is? I'm not wearing my green and pink shorts tonight. So.
No, where's the love? I picked them out specially.
Every other night I've worn my shorts. I know. Obviously, I'm back at work now.
Yeah. So you had a question for Barbara?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the 2005 is still tasting beautiful. I love. For me, it's got those lovely characteristics of an aged wine. You know, you got the smokiness, the leather, the spices, and I'm kind of wondering what the cellaring potential is of these wines, because the 2015 is obviously a lot more vibrant, younger. The fruit, the length in the palate's quite deep. So what is the cellaring potential of these wines?
I would say that the 05, because it was sourced out of very young wines, I would give it at least other 5 years. Okay. And for the 2015, I would go for at least other 20 years.
Yes, yeah, because it's.
But it's also, as always, a matter of taste.
Yeah.
So there are more and more people, they prefer young wines, they prefer the young, fresh fruit flavors. So of course, for them, they probably will be disappointed in.
I love the complexity of the 2005. I'm going to say.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I agree.
And there's a kind of quietness and a poise about it that's really interesting. I'm sure we won't be able to get more from you, but I think Blue got the 5 and the 6 from you. But I'm totally in love with this. And whoever doesn't buy it tonight, I'm probably going to buy it myself because I think it's so great to have something of this quality. Thank you for that.
And what I'm personally very proud about, you know, Maremma as a hot wine region, it's actually very easy to produce powerful wines,
yeah.
But it's not so easy to make an elegant wine. Elegant means to me that it must have also a nice facility, which gives them an elegance and a backbone. And
yeah.
I do think we did a perfect job in 05 as also in 2015, which was probably even more difficult as it was a very warm vintage.
There's a comment that came through in the chat room by someone who said initially he loved the 5, but over time he's leaning towards the 15. But I guess that's gradual degradation in the glass, right? I guess it's an interesting process that we're now looking at wines in a different kind of way, whereas before you'd buy a bottle of wine and pour it at a wine tasting and taste the wine, whereas now there's various processes to get it to everyone's homes before we do a tasting. So there's the opening, and today we open them at midday. We have a very efficient argon gas sealing process, but one of the people asked me, what's the time specifically of the bottles being opened? And I worked it out, and it was about 90 seconds between opening the bottle, checking it, and pouring for the 6 people who get each bottle. And then maybe another 30 seconds to seal with argon. But that period of time, that process is actually starting an oxidization process that maybe people have not experienced before. So it's been quite interesting to make the calls as to when the wine should be opened and poured. And I think here we're seeing that very thing. So if anyone lifts any of the 05 today, I'd say half an hour in a decanter and then just drink it. I think it's just so beautiful right away, whereas the 15 possibly would need more time in a decanter as a full bottle. Barbara, there's a question from someone in the chat room about, is there a reason for change in cepage between 5 and 15? In other words, more Bordeaux and no Sangiovese in 15?
Yes, because unfortunately we need irrigation for the Sangiovese mostly in the Maremma because it's just too warm, too hot. So we can achieve a nice Sangiovese, but it won't be as complex, as intense, as unique as the Petit Verdot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Cabernet Franc, which are maturing by dry farming. So that's the main reason why we changed the blend. But honestly, very often when I do taste an older vintage, so a wine with the old blend, I have a happy eye and a sad eye. Okay.
That's a really good way to put it, actually. Yeah. Certainly, I see that in the very old South African wines where they used to mess up their CDP styles. They used to work a lot with Petit Verdot and then stopped. And then when you go back and look at it later, you think, gosh, that's such a different wine 30 years later compared to what they're doing now. And I guess it again goes back to that thing of vine age. You know, it's a live organic thing that's going to keep changing. So thank you.
And we are changing, our tastes are changing.
Everything that we eat.
It always takes the time, you know, you can't change it just in a second and then rethink it. So. Yeah.
And during coronavirus, my waistline is the thing that's been changing the most in my life, unfortunately.
You and everyone else, Robert.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be hard coming back from that. All right, shall we move on to the Bleu? And I'm dying to know the background as to the name and etc.
Well, Il Blu, again, 2015. Il Blu is as Ilatraia, a super Tuscan, but the Ilatraia is sourced only from grapes from Maremma, and Il Blu is sourced only from grapes from the Chianti Classico region. But as we don't follow the rules of the Chianti Classico, it has to be a Super Tuscan or IGT. And the blend of Il Blu today is 50 Merlot, 45 Sangiovese, and 5 Cabernet Sauvignon. And the wine matures for 20 months in barrique, more or less 2/3 new and 1 used. And I just saw a question what the meaning is of Ilatraia, just before we probably start to taste Il Blu. Ilatraia is a name of a hill of our property, and it was named by people about 400 years. There is a small tree with the name Ilatro, and we presume that on this hill was once at least 1 or 2 or 3 of those trees. Today it's one of our best Petit Verdot growing on this hill. That's why we call our wine Ilatraia. So Il Blu is a wine we produce since '88. With the vintage '88, my parents decided that they wanted to do something new, a new wine. They wanted to add a Super Tuscan to their portfolio. And with the idea of adding a new wine, they thought that this is the best possibility also for a label. We had a pretty ugly label before. It was just a white label with some names on it, really not exciting. And so my father decided to do something new, and he was at that time an owner of an advertising agency in Switzerland. And they designed this label, this blue label with the orange capsule. We never ever changed this label, and from our point of view, it's timeless and elegant, as we would like that our wines are. Hopefully they are.
They are, for sure. What's wonderful taste on the nose after looking at it 6 hours ago or 7 hours ago is the spice. There's this rendulant, brown, beautiful, soft spice, which is, you're in love with it before you even taste it. And I haven't even got to that now. My other notes earlier today, interesting to see, was I wrote down precision versus freshness. You seem to have both those characteristics in one. Very often it's quite hard to harness those two components into a wine. And then softness and structure. And again, that's something that's tough to do. And certainly in the New World, our idea of Merlot from Southern Hemisphere wines is very different from our idea of Merlot in Italy and in France, that's for sure. I have a renewed respect for Italian Merlot over the last few years, drinking a little bit more than I should out of Tuscany in particular.
Well, with the Merlot, I'm especially in the Rada estate, we really can achieve the ripeness of the Merlot, which is so elegant, it's so complex, and it has really a unique character. I think that the Brancaia Il Blu really delivers in the nose, and then you will have the same flavors and just even more concentrated in the mouth. It's very powerful, well balanced and elegant. And again, what I mentioned before, you can enjoy it right now, but there is a long lifetime ahead.
Yeah, definitely. You're right, that power and elegance, often in Burgundy, they make a big deal about a really good Burgundy needing power and grace, and I guess that's very close to what you're about here. There's a softness, but it's with some severe gravitas. You know that you're tasting something that's really of importance. It's really glorious. What's the alcohol content? Because it's hugging the side of my glass like crazy, the legs.
It's 14.5.
Okay.
It's not something we are looking for, so I would be more than happy to bottle a wine with 13.5. It's just getting more and more difficult. Okay, there is a mix of things. We have a very small production, which makes it already difficult to have a lower alcohol, and then I presume that in Tuscany climate change is not happening that heavy right now than probably in other regions. So we still have more or less the same sun hours. We still have more or less the same quantity of rain. But generally speaking, the rain is more focused in winter. We have less rains in summer, which again makes it difficult to have a lower alcohol than 14.5.
I guess it's going to be an onward battle, right? It's not going to get any easier to create something that has a contains serious fruit component that's not overblown or blousy. The heat's going to make that harder and harder. To that end, do you think that your varietal construction for the Bleu will change? Do you think that you might incorporate something else?
It could change. You know, those are the things I mean, Il Blu has changed a lot in the last years. It was much more Sangiovese. In the early days, there was no Cabernet Sauvignon, and today it's close to be a 50-50 Sangiovese Merlot. Yeah. So things are changing. Our tastes are changing, and of course also the climate. How we do work, you know, we really try to find better and better ways how to be close to nature and close to our wines. So never say no.
Yeah, I have this idea to do a tasting of Merlot dominant wines out of Italy from our inventory, maybe to put a cutoff point of maybe at least 60% Merlot, just to see in a body of work what Merlot does when it's the dominant driver out of Italy. I'm quite excited to try that, and specifically the 2016 year, it seems to be a hockey stick qualitatively for Merlot in Italy. It's really been amazing, and 15 was glorious. I wasn't lucky enough to get to Italy last year, but the one thing Lou said when he came back was, forget what you thought about how great 15 is, 16 is off the charts. And he's absolutely right, because as these wines are rolling off onto our database, there's no question, they are absolutely amazing. There's a question about the percentage of Merlot Blue. Has it stayed the same over the years? I think you might have answered that a little earlier.
Yeah, no, it hasn't. No, it was mainly Sangiovese with a little bit Merlot, and in the early days, no Cabernet Sauvignon. Then we started to increase more the Merlot. With 2013, we did the last big change from the plan we have right now.
So I guess the bottom line is, sorry, I'm just answering someone's desperate question of how much of this wine can I have right away. Question is,
that's a good question.
I'm happy to be distracted by that. The question is, would you acknowledge a question that Lou often asks, what kinds of wines are you drinking as benchmarks against what you do? And interestingly enough, there was a question, Massetto is obviously seen, certainly from our part of the world, as the premium Merlot producer out of Italy right now. What are your views on that? Obviously, I've run out of kidneys. I have none left to sell to buy a bottle of Massetto, so it's kind of theoretical for me.
Yeah, also my taste definitely has changed in the last year. When I was a girl, at home, it was mostly French wines. I guess more or less whoever does have my age started with French wines, because there was another way of wine culture than we have today. I mean, we have today, luckily us as wine lovers, we can buy wine all over the world, and mostly on very high level. There are less wines every year with really big wine failures, so it has become more and more interesting to taste from wherever. But I started definitely in France, and then of course as soon as we purchased Tuscany, let's say the second part of our home wine cellar was Tuscany and some other Italians. Yeah. And today I do have in my cellar all kinds of wines. For me, it's always very important that they are balanced. I like a perfect balance between fruit flavors, acidity, tannins, and alcohol. Nothing of them should be dominant, but if it's white, rosé, red, or sparkling, that's all fine for me.
Yeah. Somebody is asking if you would mind to compare Italian Merlot to Right Bank. I guess it flows on from your statement now, to Right Bank Merlot from France.
As I just mentioned before, we do have all over the world today great wines, and that makes it for me very important to try to make the grapes as typical for the spot where they do grow. Okay, let's say 30 years ago, it was quite easy in a blind tasting to find out where wine comes. Not only because of the quality, not only because of the typicity of the soil, but also because of their failures. And mostly the failures we don't have anymore. So the typicity of the soil becomes more and more important. And to achieve a ripeness, which is not only the ripeness of the fruit, but which is linked to the soil, you need dry farming from my point of view. You need to make organic farming. And from our point of view, of course, we believe also very much in the spontaneous fermentation, which adds again something which is very unique from where we are. So adding as much as possible things which are unique for where you are. And this makes a Merlot not only just to an Italian Merlot, but a Merlot from Tuscany, and even more specific, a Merlot from Brancaia.
Yeah, I think the overarching thing about Merlot from this part of the world is this gorgeous longevity about it, beautiful, silky, rippling texture, and then some very, very serious fruit construct, which certainly outclasses a lot of other parts of the world. So bravo on this wine. It's really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, Robert, the thing that we got from our last trip to Italy, right, we went and we visited Brancaia. In fact, Barbara, your neighbour up the road, good friends of ours at Castellare di Castellina, are making some phenomenal Merlot. And the thing that struck us when we visited you was the quality of your Merlot now is becoming so outstanding that personally I believe you should be making a straight Merlot now and getting in the race.
Yes.
The Merlot coming out of that particular sub-region of around that Castellare area is phenomenal. It's got such depth. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
The only problem with production of Merlot, it needs a good press agent, right? Because there's so many people around the world that don't give it the respect it's due, sadly. And it's only, I guess, when you taste wines like this or wines out of the right bank that you kind of recalibrate just the majesty of it. It's really,
you can sit there and whinge about Merlot all you like, but you're not going to refuse a Petrus when it gets on your table, right?
Oh, hell no. Particularly if it's original. We get a lot of fakes around this part of the world.
No, but seriously, Barbara, the Merlot that you guys are producing now is just unbelievable. Fantastic.
I agree with you. It's I'm especially fond about our Merlot from Rada, but also the Merlot from Castellina is really it's ripe and but still have a nice acidity. We are also quite lucky that we have in all our spots a pretty high pH, which helps us to keep this freshness, this high acidity.
You're right. It's that acidity that keeps it all together. Otherwise, it just gets flabby.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
A bit like me.
Yeah. It's not flat. Yeah.
Yeah. So any more questions before we leave, Barbara? It's about lunchtime in Tuscany. Don't even tell us what you're going to eat.
I already had the wine.
Yeah, I don't even want to know. So any more questions before we go? No, that's everybody. So thank you so much, Barbara. It's been great to have you.
Thank you. And I'm very, very sorry about my bad connection I have.
We'll do it better next time. Thank you. See you again. Ciao.
Thank you.
Good night. Goodbye.
Good evening to you.
I'm going back to that Chianti now. So Andrea made it, Lou, which is good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good.
God knows where he is.
Oh, there he is.
In it. Yeah.
Well, I didn't mention the fact that we've actually got quite a few back vintages of Ilatraia. We've got 05, 6, 7, 8.
9.
I've done no 9. They've got none left, but I'll keep on buying into them. We've bought them and sold them out a few times now because people who know the wine just swoop on it.
Just take it. Yeah.
I didn't. The new back vintages just arrived literally because logistics has been such a disaster out of Italy for the last little period that it took too long for it to get here. So I haven't really